Today we are going to be presenting on the Red River of the North. Our presentation will cover physical, ecological, and human watershed characteristics including physical geography, hydrological regime, water quality and water chemistry, ecology, and human geography. Then we will discuss water resource use, management history, stakeholders and conflicts, conflict resolution efforts and challenges to date, and assessing the current state of watershed management. The Red River, or Red River of the North, is a 116,500 kilometer squared watershed that runs through Manitoba, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. The river flows northward, starting its journey in Minnesota and eventually dumping into Lake Winnipeg. The land surrounding the river is predominantly cropland, which makes up roughly 66% of the landscape. The other land cover types are pastures, which make up 6%, 10% forests, 5% wetlands, 10% rangelands, and 3% cities, which include Winnipeg, Grand Forks, and Fargo. The majority of the land throughout the basin is flat grassland. The river flows through the valley of the former glacial lake Agassiz, which created a large floodplain. There is also a freshwater river delta called the Netley-Leavow Marsh, which is one of the largest freshwater wetlands in North America and is currently threatened by nutrient runoff. The area was glaciated by Lake Agassiz, and there is a prominent amount of glacial drift in the area, which contributes to the aquifers in the region. There are also sand and gravel aquifers that store groundwater, and the sedimentary bedrock aquifers and glacial drift aquifers are connected to streams in the area. The three main tributaries to the Red River are the Cheyenne River, Pembina River, and the Assiniboine River, which are all highlighted on their respective maps. 75% of the river flows comes from eastern tributaries. Runoff occurs in spring and early summer as a result of heavy rain as well as snowmelt, which is a major cause of flooding in the area. The period of high precipitation in the area runs from April to July, and the mean annual precipitation is around 520 millimeters. The mean annual discharge in the river section between Fargo and Grand Forks is 127,946.918 meters cubed per day. The period of high discharge for the river is from March to May, and the low discharge period is from October to February. High flow periods are from March to July, and low flow is from December to late February, as you can see in the graph provided. As previously stated, the average annual precipitation is 520 millimeters per year, and the average discharge is 238 meters cubed per second, or 7.5 billion meters cubed per year. The runoff equals 64 millimeters per year, and the runoff precipitation ratio is 12%. The evapotranspiration is 456 millimeters per year. However, since the area is in the prairie pothole region, we have to consider that in our calculations of evapotranspiration. Some of the water that would be going into evapotranspiration will go into groundwater recharge, and this means that the calculated evapotranspiration will be lower than 456 millimeters per year. The basin is extremely flood prone. This year alone, there is greater than 65% chance of moderate flooding in Oslo, Minnesota, and between 35 to 60% chance of moderate flooding in several other places along the river, including Moorhead and Pembina. The flooding is mainly due to spring snowmelt and soil thawing, but precipitation also contributes heavily. Another contributing factor is the low water banks and flat land. Prairie potholes normally replenish and store groundwater, which decreases the risk of flooding and erosion. However, drainage of wetlands for agriculture has decreased the efficiency of the prairie potholes, allowing for the flooding in the basin.
The Red River Basin is most negatively impacted by high concentrations and loads of total phosphorus and total nitrogen, where these nutrients are the largest contributors to eutrophication and algal blooms in the basin. In 2024, samples collected from the international boundary of the Red River showed that for both total phosphorus and total nitrogen, the concentration and loads all exceeded the goals set by the Watershed Board by at least 99%. Once in the watershed system, it is very difficult for these nutrients to exit the system. Sources of these nutrients are mainly attributed to agricultural production, and the highest loads and concentrations are observed during snowmelt freshet. Other than total nitrogen and total phosphorus, trace metals and pesticides have also been detected, with the sources likely being agricultural runoff. Additionally, more than 80% of the samples collected from the international boundary between September 2023 and October 2024 exceeded targets set for total dissolved solids. The sulfate target was also exceeded by more than 50% of the samples collected during this time. Increases in turbidity in downstream areas of the watershed have also been observed and may coincide with the increase in total suspended solids observed in the upper areas of the Red River Basin. The Red River watershed falls under the jurisdiction of both the United States and Canada. The regions where the watershed falls into are Manitoba, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. With an estimated population of around 1.3 million people residing in the Red River Basin, standardized over the area of the watershed, there are approximately 11 people per square kilometer. The highest population distribution is in Manitoba, with more than half of the population concentrated in Winnipeg alone. The remaining population is largely distributed in smaller cities. Within the Red River watershed, many Indigenous communities live both in Canada and the United States. In Canada, many of the Indigenous communities are located south of Lake Winnipeg, and these groups include Roseau River, Swan Lake, Dakota Tepe, Long Plain, and Buffalo Point communities. In the United States, specifically in North Dakota, there are Red Lake and White Earth reservations within the basin. Additionally, some of the rivers have Indigenous names. Prior to heavy disturbance via industrialization, the landscape was largely dominated by grasslands and complex marshes. Today, the landscape is largely influenced by the presence of a prairie pothole region and the conversion of natural ecosystem areas to agricultural lands. These potholes have altered the landscape and have made it troublesome for migratory birds and wildlife to settle in the area. The potholes have also contributed to the flood-prone nature of the landscape and the formation of a large floodplain. One of the prominent wetlands remaining within the basin is the Netley-Libau Marsh, which is an important habitat and conservation site in the region. Notable fish species in the region include channel catfish and lake sturgeon.
Water resource use and management history. Agriculture is the dominant land use in the Red River Basin due to its rich soils, with about 85% of land used for production. The region is ideal for growing wheat, soybeans, corn, and sugar beets. While practices like crop rotation and no-till farming help reduce erosion, agriculture still has major environmental impacts. It relies heavily on groundwater, and drainage systems have altered natural water flow, reduced wetlands, and contributed to nutrient pollution and eutrophication. A major concern is the expansion of mega dairy operations. In 2025, Food and Water Watch filed a lawsuit against the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality over the approval of Riverview's mega dairies. These include a 25,000 head and a 12,500 head facility, totaling about 37,500 cows. These operations will produce about 247.5 million cubic feet of contaminated manure and wastewater each year. So to put that into perspective, Rogers Place has a volume of about 155 million cubic feet, meaning this waste could fill it up about 1.5 times every year. This waste contains nutrients, pathogens, and other contaminants that would be applied to fields that drain into the Red River. While agriculture dominates today, forestry has also shaped the basin. In the 1800s, logging was a major industry that supplied construction materials and fuel, and today tree rings are used to study past flooding. However, due to the heavy logging in the 19th century, most trees are only about 100 to 120 years old, limiting historical records. So the photo taken on the side was taken in 1875 at the Assiniboine River, showing the complete absence of riverbank trees due to the deforestation. Urban and industrial activities also contribute to water quality issues through stormwater runoff, municipal sewage, and industrial discharge. Larger cities like Winnipeg use mechanical waste water treatment plants that discharge continuously into the river, while smaller communities rely on wastewater lagoons that release effluent into the tributaries. There have been efforts to improve watershed management. Monitoring and modeling tools such as the Sparrow model are used to better understand how human activities affect water quality by following the transport of modeled contaminants, understanding their origin and fates. Water management in Minnesota is guided by policies such as the Clean Water Act, which requires water quality standards to protect drinking water, recreation, fish consumption, and aquatic life. The river is also a key water source, supplying drinking water to municipal and industrial users across Manitoba, Minnesota, and North Dakota. However, access is not equal, as some Métis communities still face long-term boil water advisories. Flood management is a major focus. After the Manitoba 1950 flood displaced about 100,000 people and destroyed 10,000 homes, major infrastructure like the Red River Floodway was developed and expanded to reduce flood damage. Flow regulation is also controlled by dams throughout the basin. There are 8 low-head dams on the U.S. portion of the river used for water storage and level regulation, along with others used for flood control, hydropower, and water supply. However, these structures disrupt natural flow, block fish migration, and impact river ecosystems. Due to the ecological impacts, some are being modified into rock arch rapids, or considered for removal to improve connectivity and safety. The river is also deeply connected to human activity and livelihoods. It has served as a transportation corridor for Indigenous peoples for millennia, and later supported the European fur trade and settlement. As a result, many towns and homesteads were built along the river and its tributaries. Today, the river continues to be used for recreational activities such as angling, boating, and ice skating, supported by parks and historic sites throughout the basin. Programs like the Métis Environmental Leaders of Tomorrow, or the MELT program, also help educate youth about environmental impacts through hands-on activities like canoeing and fishing, strengthening connections to the watershed and supporting future stewardship.
Main stakeholders mainly considered for this project include government agencies and commissions for simplicity, although there are thousands of potential stakeholders in the Red River. The International Joint Commission is the stakeholder with primary authority. They oversee water quality and quantity, ensuring cooperation across borders. Next is the Red River Basin Commission. It is a cooperative approach to water management within the basin. It is a well-established forum for developing and implementing solutions to cross-boundary issues. Next is the Manitoba Métis Federation. The stakeholder is meant to represent the Red River Métis. Their main focus is to maintain and protect their customs, traditions, and cultures. Then there are several government agencies like Manitoba Parks, Dakota Department of Water Resources, the Department of Natural Resources, and it is under the Canadian Heritage River System, where it is recognized for its outstanding natural, cultural, and recreational heritage. The evolution of the Red River management. So in 1909, the Boundary Waters Treaty was established to establish the International Joint Commission, where its original goal was to prevent and resolve disputes over the usage of water. And then in 1948, the Surrey Red River Engineering Board was created to report on the usage and appointment of water. This was made to ensure that the growing agricultural and municipal demands would not have a negative effect elsewhere in the watershed. Following this, in 1969, the International Red River Pollution Board was created to monitor water quality and to ease the concern of pollution. It partnered with the states and government to improve water quality. Then, following the 1997 Red River flood, the International Red River Basin Task Force was formed. It notes a shift towards basin-wide hydraulic modeling, and currently we are using an integrated management. The Pollution Board and the Engineering Board were merged into the International Red River Board. This recognizes that you cannot manage water without also managing water health and ecology. While there are many stakeholders like the International Joint Commission and the Red River Basin Committee, there are also conflicts surrounding river usage and management strategies. The Devil Lake Output project was in North Dakota, and it was meant to build an artificial drain for a landlocked lake, which could cause potential issues. The Fargo-Moorhead diversion was also another conflict. And finally, the mega dairy crisis is an ongoing conflict within stakeholders.
Assessing current state. Overall, integrated watershed management is only partially implemented in the Red River Basin. While monitoring and restoration efforts have improved, legacy environmental damage from agriculture drainage still affects water flow, wetlands, and water quality. Economic interests ultimately outweigh ecological sustainability and social equity, contradicting IWM principles. Agriculture and expanding mega dairy operations continue to outweigh ecological protection. Although some conservation practices are used, nutrient pollution still remains high. Social outcomes are also uneven. Millions of dollars are spent on flood protection systems to benefit larger regions, while some Métis communities still face limited access to safe drinking water. Overall, a better balance between economic, ecological, and social goals are needed, as current practices do not fully meet the principles of integrated watershed management.
Future stakeholder considerations. One is to facilitate leadership opportunities and communication between government bodies and Indigenous communities. Examine the effects of economic prioritization on the way of local communities residing within the basin. Consider the future implementations of climate change on landscape and water quality of the basin, including an overall drying effect on the landscape with warming temperatures, limited wetland frequency, and potential unpredictability of hydrological regimes and future flooding events. Monitoring restoration projects and flood management strategies show progress towards more coordinated watershed planning. However, ecological protection needs to become a higher priority in future stakeholder discussions.
Thank you for watching.